Hi, everyone. We are recording the session as always. All of our session recordings are freely available on our YouTube channel. So if anybody misses or they want to catch up or go back on some of the sessions that we've done previously, you can do so. Welcome to our Inclusion and Wellbeing Forum for LSAs. My name is Catherine. I'm one of the founding members of Incluzun.com. Most of you will know Harmeet very well. She's our partner. She's unavailable today. She's traveling. So myself and Miss Bhavna will be hosting the session today. And today we are going to look at back to school preparation, how we should be ready for our school, for our class, looking at some information about different curricula, about, we'll also look at the school structures, things to do to support your students. And as always, if you have any questions, please pop them into the chat. Miss Bhavna will be jumping in and out. I'll be asking her to support with some of the slides, and we'll both monitor the chat. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put your hand up or to pop them into the chat. Okay. So we'll begin with who's who in the school. I know a lot of you may be new to working in schools, and some of you are really well used to working in schools. But very often we forget to think about who has which roles in a school. So the majority of private schools in the UAE are monitored by a board. So on that board, you will have the owners, you will have governors, and you may have, say, a group, a company that might own the school. So for example, GEMS or Bloom or Star, any of those bigger groups that own multiple schools. So underneath the board, you would have a general manager who will be operating the school. And then within the school campus, you have your principal. And depending on which curricula you're following, you have a vice principal or an assistant principal. They're kind of the same thing. You generally will have a head of school who would be kind of a mini principal for the secondary school, the primary school, and the early years. Underneath this layer, you would then have your grade level leaders. So if you have multiple classes in one grade, like if there are 3 or 4 grade 1, you would have a grade level leader. So within that structure on the senior leadership level, you would have your head of inclusion, who will be the most important person for you as an LSA. And your head of inclusion should be somebody who you are really familiar with. You should know them by name and they should know you for definite. Now, there are different curricula. I think in the UAE, there are probably about 15 or 20 curricula available. The most common curriculum that are practiced in schools in the UAE by a mile are, can anyone guess? And you can shout out, please feel free to shout out. Which are the 2 most common or the 3 most common curricula that we have?
We have British and American curricula.
Yeah, and the third?
CBSE.
Yes. So the one that has the most students is the CBSE. And it's one that we often forget about if we've never taught in CBSE. That's closely followed by the American curriculum, which covers most of the MOE schools, the Ministry of Education schools, and then the national curriculum of England. You sometimes hear it called D of E, Department of Education. That's the UK curriculum, the D of E curriculum. And then the ministry, some of the ministry schools follow an Emirati curriculum also, which is delivered in Arabic. So those are by far the most common. We also have Italian curricula, Swiss, French, Chinese, Japanese. I'm trying to think. There's a Welsh school. There isn't an Irish school, which is interesting, considering there's so many Irish teachers. Are there any other schools that I'm missing out? Is anyone else teaching in a different curriculum?
I think
IB Australian
IB,
curriculum.
yes.
and ICSE.
ICSE is on, yeah, that's correct. Any other ones? There probably are more that I haven't listed, but those are kind of the main ones. So it's important that you know what curriculum your school is working on. And it's really valuable to download your curriculum and read it. Now, you might think, oh, it's not really pertinent to me, but the curriculum is quite literally the guideline that the teacher uses every day so that he or she will know what he should be teaching in class. And if you know your curriculum, you will have a really good understanding of what it is that the teacher is working on. Now, when you download a curriculum, say, for example, you download the National Curriculum of England, you would flip through until you come to the grade that you're working in. And for every curriculum, it's the same. Under that grade, there will be objectives. And the objectives are the targets that the children within that grade level are working toward at all times. So you would have objectives for all of the subject areas specific to the grades that you're working on. And it's really valuable to know what those are. And it's really interesting as well, because you know exactly what the expected age-related outcomes are for your child. Now, what does that mean? When a teacher says age-related outcomes, it simply means take the age of your student and the average expected knowledge or capacity, their ability for children of that age, that's their age-related expectation. So say you've got a 7-year-old, all 7-year-olds would have a general expectation of knowledge for that year, for that age, and that's what age-related expectations or outcomes means. So that would relate to the grade that they're in the curriculum. Some students are working behind their age-related expectations. So that might mean that you have a student in grade 5 and they're working on maybe grade 4 or grade 3 expectations. That's what that means. Okay, so workplace etiquette. What should we expect when we go to the school? How should we behave, and what kind of things do the teachers and the SLT expect from us? Whether you're a teacher, a leader, an LSA, anybody, if you're starting a new role, it's good practice to arrive a little bit early. If you're working in a class, it's always useful to have a few minutes in your classroom just to kind of ground yourself, relax into the classroom so you're not rushing, prepare your resources and get ready for the day. Network with people outside of your classroom. So talk to other LSAs who are working in the school, talk to your teachers, talk to your leaders, and get to know people in the school. The more you get to know people, the better you will be at getting things done. So if you want, let's say, access to a specific room, or you need photocopying, or you need some resources, the more people you know, the easier it will be to get those things. Always be willing to help. If you have some really good strategies or tools that you know work with certain students, it's really valuable to share that with your colleagues. I think we probably all remember the first couple of days we were in a classroom, and it can be really scary and overwhelming. I remember when I started as a teacher, I really felt like I didn't know what I was doing. And that was probably for nearly a year before I became comfortable and confident. I really thought I questioned everything I was doing. So having somebody who can help you and guide you is really valuable. And if you can be that person, that's really important. Do bring different ideas. So if you've worked in other curriculum or in other schools and you've learned lots of strategies, do share those with your team. Create a proper personal email address. This is really important, guys, especially if you're applying for jobs or you're communicating with parents. I see so many email addresses that are like sweet honey or sugar plum or something like this. It doesn't look professional when you have an email address like this. So I would advise to change it to either your name, if that's available, or something like your name and maybe a number, your date of birth or something like that, so that it looks more professional. Jump at the chance to complete tasks and be flexible. I think anyone who has worked as an LSA, we know that it needs a lot of flexibility because you can be asked to do a million different jobs in any given day. And don't forget to dress appropriately for work. This is really, really important. So the majority of schools in the UAE ask you to cover your shoulders. A lot of schools will ask you to cover below the elbow, especially Islamic schools. And for a lady, you should always have your skirt to or below the knee. And for a man, never wear shorts to school unless you're doing a sports day. So always long trousers and where possible, a long sleeved shirt. Okay, now this is some interactive part of the presentation. So in the chat, please be brave. I want you to look at these different characters and write for me 2 strategies that you would use to support this student in school. So imagine, and don't be scared. There's no wrong answers. Imagine you have a student who is very, very shy and they're very slow to talk to other students. Mr. Nobody, how might you support that student in school? Anybody? Come on, guys. There's 46 people in here. Let's have some action. What might you do to support a student? Yeah, you can call out if you wish. Oh, thank you, Marika. Peer pairing, so putting the child with another student. Excellent. Marianne, communication, brilliant. Pushpa, role play, awesome. Yeah, if you want to speak, Oppo A31. Yeah. What's your idea? Go ahead.
Collaboration.
Yes. Yeah. Find out the child's passion. Yes. Any other ones? So these are all really, really good ideas, good strategies. Give them a listening ear. Yeah, it's really important to take time and listen to them. Oh, and give them a lead role. That is a really, really useful tool. Okay, the next one. You've got a student who is misbehaving and demonstrating negative behaviors. What strategies might you use to support a student who's misbehaving?
You can use positive reinforcers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Change their role. Okay, Nancy, I'm not sure I understand that. What do you mean when you say change their role? Set your expectations clear. Really, really important. Renata, hands-on activities. Yeah. Oh, you take his role. Nancy is saying you take his role. So how do you mean? Well, like emulate his behavior? Galaxy A9, distract the child. Yes, we can take them out, give them a movement break. Marika, thank you. Model good behavior. Oh, Oppo, economy token. I like that. So that's kind of a reward system. Is that correct? Like okay, Nancy, saying make the same action to show that it's not desirable. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. There are lots of videos on YouTube where a parent will throw themselves down on the floor and scream and shout, and the kids are like, oh my gosh. Give him a lead role and give choices. I love that one. Thank you, Bhavna. That's really valuable. Give choices.
Dojo points, class dojo points
are brilliant. Yes.
Also
Now, little Miss Shy.
give short and clear instructions.
Yeah, absolutely. Look for positive behaviors, give rewards, make them aware of the effects of their behavior. Yes, Renata. Use
And then you can also
positive
pamper the child as
reinforcement.
well.
Say that again.
You can also pamper the child as well.
Oh, I can't hear you. Can you speak up a little bit, please?
You can pamper the child. You can pamper the child, pampering.
Oh, pamper him, give him lots of affection and care. Yes, yeah. Now for the next one, if you have a student who's very shy, how can we help them to break out and be more interactive? And I think this applies for adults as well. If somebody's very shy, how can we support them? Prompt the child by promising them what he or she likes, okay, and keep the promise. That's really valuable. Icebreaker games, yeah, I love that, Bhavna.
Can I say
Pairing.
something?
Yeah, who's that?
Goodness. I would say one of the ways to help a shy child to overcome that shyness is by getting the child more involved, giving more role or things to do. It helps the child overcome the shyness.
Brilliant, absolutely. And when they feel that confidence in achieving something that you've given them to do, they really come out of their shell. And the last one is probably one of the more difficult ones. How can we support those kids who always say, no, I can't do it, it's too hard? What can we do for those? And we all have them. There are children like this in every class. They don't have to be students of determination. There are so many students who just say, no, I can't do it. How can we help them? Affirmation, yes.
Praise, encouragement, motivation.
Positive words.
Yes. Give them tasks that are achievable. Juliet, that is so important. If you help them to understand that they can with little things, encourage them and make them believe they can do. Yes.
Scaffolding.
And also
Scaffolding.
Yes. Chunking, scaffolding.
Scaffolding, yeah.
This is brilliant, guys. Really good. Give them time to digest the subject matter and use positive reinforcement, break down the task. Really brilliant ideas, guys. Absolutely excellent. Okay, right. Classroom etiquette continued. So classroom etiquette refers to the manner in which students should act when the class is in session. Conventions related to being respectful, participating, and asking before they use technology. So we are talking about how we should encourage our students to behave during class. Now, the number one is that we encourage them to be independent learners so they can do without us. That should always be number one. So we should be prompting, but always reducing those prompts as much as we can. So prompting them at cleanup time, prompting them to look at the speaker, prompt them to be nice, to walk, to raise their hand, and keep their hands to themselves. But always remembering, we need to reduce our support so that the child can be independent in class. And of course, always that they should be respectful. Okay, now a really important tool for us as LSAs is the timetables. Do not be afraid to ask your teacher to give you the timetable. There are so many LSAs who I've worked with. The teacher hasn't given you the timetable, and that's a really basic thing that you need. Sometimes teachers forget. Sometimes teachers are really busy, and sometimes they just don't realize that you are an active member of the classroom and you need a timetable. So if they have not given it to you, ask them for the timetable. It's really important that you know what your day looks like. You know when your breaks are, that you know what's coming up next, so you can be prepared and your student can be prepared. Especially for students who struggle with transitions, it's important that you can say, okay, it is 9:45 now. In 10 minutes, we move from English to art. In 5 minutes, it's time for art, so we need to finish this task. In 3 minutes, it's time for art. We need to pack up our things, and then you're preparing your student, because the teacher sometimes will be so busy with the whole class, they forget to lead in transitions. And for the majority of students of determination, transitions are really tough. So it's important that we're able to prepare them with loads of time before they start their transitions. Okay, who will I be working with and who is my contact point? Right, guys, in the chat, can you note down anyone who you think is important to be in touch with in the school? As an LSA, which people should you know? Teachers, yep. The Senko, very good. Homeroom teacher, yep. Who else? Anybody else, guys? The inclusion lead, yeah. The head of inclusion, class teacher, TA. I'm so glad somebody said the TA. Yes, head of inclusion, inclusion leader. The safeguarding lead, excellent, really important. And the parents, absolutely. Your class teacher parents. Okay, so the difference between a SENDCO and a head of inclusion is very small. And head of, oh, thank you, Renata, a really good long list. The head of inclusion usually is SLT, which is a senior leadership team. That's your principal, your vice principals, and your heads. So your head of inclusion is the same as a SENCO essentially, but a head of inclusion means that they're on the SLT usually. And a SENCO means a special educational needs and disabilities coordinator. The CO stands for coordinator. So your SENCO is the same as the head of inclusion generally, but a SENCO may not be on the senior leadership team. So your number one would be your class teacher, because they will be setting up the day. So you need to be in touch with them every day. What are our plans for the day? How can I support? The inclusion team, so that's your SENCO, your inclusion leader, SEN teachers, and SEN means special educational needs teachers, your parents, any therapists, and if you're working with us at Inclusion, being in touch with us for support. Now, we forgot on this list to add the TA. The teaching assistant, or CA, classroom assistant, is vitally important as well, because you and the TA can work really closely together. And if you've got a really good relationship with your TA, you can have a lot of fun in class. It doesn't have to be boring. You shouldn't just be sitting quietly next to one student all day. You can make it a lot of fun if you work really well with your class teacher. And talk to your teacher about your strengths. Let them know what you're really good at, and tell her where you can support not just your student, but with other students as well. Okay, who are the external therapists that work in the school? Okay, guys, in the chat, can you think of some different types of therapists or specialists who we would work with through the school or through the family? We've got RBT, yeah, and RBT is a registered behavioral technician, if I'm not mistaken, ABA, an applied behavioral analyst, OT, occupational therapist, BCBA is a board certified behavior analyst, if I'm not mistaken, a behavior therapist, a speech and language therapist, psychologist. Guys, you've got all of these. Speech and language therapist, yeah. You would have an educational psychologist also, and you might have a medical doctor if you've got some profound needs or some medical needs that are comorbid. So you guys know all of these. We've got, what does the OT do? So an occupational therapist, occupational in this sense refers to anything that is to do with getting through the occupation of daily life. So how you access just your life in general, getting up, getting dressed, anything physical, understanding depth perception, navigating the world. So occupational basically means how you can live independently. The speech and language therapist or speech and language pathologist, they're called an SLT or SLP. They work on anything to do with oral production, speaking, oral production, listening. So you would have expressive language where you're communicating what your needs are, and then receptive language, you're receiving the language and do you understand what people are asking you. A psychologist will look at absolutely anything to do with how the brain functions. And then you have a psychiatrist who would look at why things happen. So the difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist is basically, a psychologist is how, the mechanics of the brain, and a psychiatrist is why, the influence of external factors and the chemicals within the brain. So a psychiatrist would generally be for emotional and chemical imbalances in the brain, whereas a psychologist would be all of the more common conditions like dyslexia, dyspraxia, all of those disorders and sensory needs. So an OT, an occupational therapist, will support with sensory integration, which is one of the more common areas of need that we're seeing in our students. Okay, so probably the most common area of need, particularly in young students, and statistically the most common in children under 5, are speech and language delays or deficit. So there's a difference between a delay and a deficit. A delay means that the child has the function, but it's slow, it's developing slowly. A deficit means that there's something missing, and part of that skill is not present. So it's important to know with your student, is it a delay or is it a deficit? Because if you have a delay, a general practice will help them to catch up. But if there's a deficit, you would need specific tools to help that child learn a skill that they don't have. Okay, somebody is saying there's a little bit of feedback. Okay, I'm muting. All right. So communication is one of the most important tools that you can have as an LSA. And in my experience, as a psychologist and as a teacher, the most common cause of a child behaving in a way that we don't want is because they can't communicate their needs, or because they don't know how, they don't understand what we're asking them. That's usually the most common. And I'm going to call on Miss Bhavna to see if you've got any experience with children who find it difficult to communicate.
Hi, everyone. I hope I'm audible and visible to everyone.
You're audible, but not visible, but audible is okay. And now we have you. Super.
Okay, thank you. Okay. As Ms. Catherine, we are enjoying the presentation very much, too much in detail, and we love that, your inputs and your communication, which is going on. So yes, there are two things which I have noticed in since I have worked I started my career as an LSA, there is a very thin line when we see a global developmental delay in speech of a child. And, when a child is with autism, till the child, is up till 6 or 7 years of age, you cannot actually understand it's a global development delay in his speech, or it is basically because of autism. Some children will perform very well with the therapies, and they will mask their communication skills, which they are not able to do it when they are in autism. Communication, I think, for children is very, very important, because if they are not able to communicate, behaviors start creeping in, and it is quite unmanageable at times with the children when their behaviors are very high. So the more you will give words to a child, the more you will start developing the language of a child. It will be more beneficial to yourself as well, because then the child will set in the class. You will work more on academics rather than spending time on behaviors. And that is what the school wants. That is what the parents are looking for, to integrate the child in the class.
That's really, really important. And it makes your life as an LSA easier as well, when you can understand your student and they can understand you. Thank you very much, Bhavna. I love your insights, because you've done it. You've been in LSA, you've done all the courses, and it's really valuable. And if anybody else has experience that you want to share, please do so. We're all ears. Okay, so the next thing that we should be aware of in the school are the school policies. Now, you don't have to read through the whole of your different school policies, but there are some ones that you really need to know the procedures for. And why do we need policies? They're important because they help a school to establish rules and procedures and to create standards for the quality of learning. They also create standards for accountability, and without them, there would be probably people would be confused as to what their roles are and what they should do. So I'm going to ask you guys, what school policies do you think you should be aware of? What are the first ones that come to mind? And can you write them in the chat?
Safeguarding.
Yeah, brilliant. That's probably number one. Yeah.
Child protection.
Yes. Yeah. So child protection and safeguarding are kind of the same thing. Some schools have them separate, but most will have them the same. Behavior policy, really important. Yeah.
Hands off policy.
Which one?
Hands-off policy.
What's a hands-off policy? I'm not familiar.
It's like we don't touch the child. Like there's a rule, we never touch a child. The way we touch a child is like, we really don't go and hug or something to the child. All LSAs need to sign a hands-off policy in our schools.
Okay. Okay, that's interesting. Right, so the hands-off policy, that's a tricky one, because a lot of us as LSAs or SEND teachers, we have to be very hands-on. So if you've got a hands-off policy in your school, it's important that you have somewhere in your job description a note that says the school is okay with you handling where appropriate. That's valuable. Thank you. We've got a safety policy. We've got the dress policy, emergency crisis. Yeah. Fire drills, child protection. Lockdown policy. Yeah. Thankfully, we don't have to know about that too heavily in this country, but every school has to have one in the UAE. Hygiene, nutrition, dress code. It's also useful to ask if there's a toileting policy, so that you know what the school's general rules and procedures are for toileting. And that's most important for the older students who need support with toileting. Okay, so the policies, what do they mean for you? Some examples of policies. We have our employee policy. So everyone should have a job description, and that job description should fit under the employee policy. You don't have to go and read all of these, but if there's anything that you are nervous about or you feel you need more clarity, you can ask your school's HR team to get them. And if you're working with us, we can ask for you. Oh, Faisal, really good. The student code of conduct and the communication policy, they're really good. Safeguarding, you guys said. If there's any confidentiality policies, and you can look at some examples on the internet. But again, it's important that you know the safeguarding policy, because safeguarding, you need to know the procedures. Generally in the UAE, every school by law should have a safeguarding policy. In that safeguarding policy, there should be named one of the leadership team as your safeguarding leader. So if you ever have a concern about a child, you know who you can go to in the school. And this is probably one of the most important takeaways from today's session. If you don't know who your safeguarding lead is in your school, find out tomorrow. Every teacher should know, and if they don't, they should. And if your teacher doesn't know, ask your head of inclusion or your SENCO. So if you have a concern about a child, about a teacher, or if you're concerned for your own well-being, your safeguarding lead is somebody who you should be able to go to talk to. Now, unless you believe that a child is in immediate danger of harm, you should never go to the authorities before you go to your safeguarding lead. So in the UAE, you should always go to your safeguarding lead first, unless you think a child is in immediate danger of either harm or death. Always go to the safeguarding lead. Okay, we can go ahead. Right, just for Dubai, because we have the majority of our LSAs are in Dubai. I know we've got some in the Northern Emirates and Abu Dhabi. But in Dubai, some of the important policies that come from the regulator are, there are 3 documents from the KHDA. So each different area of the UAE is governed by a regulator. So what is the regulator? There's a federal Ministry of Education, and federal means it's the whole country. So the whole country is under the Ministry of Education, but then underneath them, there are educational regulators who regulate what is happening in schools. So the regulator for Dubai is the KHDA, which is the Knowledge and Human Development Authority. In Abu Dhabi, it's the Abu Dhabi Education and Knowledge Department, ADEC. And in the Northern Emirates, we have SPIA, which is the Sharjah Private Education Authority. And those regulators make sure that schools are abiding by certain policies. Dubai is probably the more advanced in terms of having policies for inclusion, but Sharjah and the Northern Emirates are catching up really quickly. And I think SPIA are going to have some really, really good advancements in inclusion very soon. Abu Dhabi is a little bit behind, but it's important to know who your regulator is so that you can have a little bit of access to these kind of policies. They're really good to know what's in these policies. They're really good guidelines for good practice. Okay, so how can we support our learners in the classroom? Now, you guys have come up with some really, really good ideas about supporting different needs when we looked at the 4 Mr. Men characters. But now we're going to look at a kind of a general practice for every kind of student you will meet. So first of all, we need to determine what does the student know, because a communication barrier might mask a lot of knowledge. And it's important to know that some kids, they may not be able to tell you what they know, but they might know a lot. So trying to navigate what they understand is really important, and using picture cards allowing them to write, allow them to give you whatever means of communication they can is really important. Set a goal for your learning outcomes for your student, and this is where the IEP is really important. That will guide you, the individual education plan. Plan instructional support. How can you break down the tasks? And I know a lot of you, I'm trying to remember who was saying to do chunking. Chunk your different tasks, break them into different sections, and scaffold the learning. You guys have mentioned all of those different tasks or different strategies. Then implement the lessons and give feedback to the student at all times. Then, as we were saying, we need to fade support, work out the prompting, reduce your prompting at all times so that the student can become independent, and then continue building on content and monitoring, providing constant feedback. So remember, just like we need feedback all the time, our students need feedback. And don't focus on negative feedback. Remember to give really positive feedback wherever we can. Okay, so planning. Here, just so that you know what a lesson plan looks like. Every school usually should have a lesson plan either for the week, or some schools have daily lesson plans. So a lesson plan lays out what the teacher will be covering that day in her lessons or his lessons. They should list the objectives for that lesson. And remember, the objectives come from your curriculum, and they should list how they're going to achieve those objectives. So an example might be, say, a US curriculum, grade 1 science. My objective might be that the students can name and label parts of the body. And then the class lesson body might be that they have a model of a body and they have to stick on the different organs or different body parts. Now, when you know what the lesson plan is for the day and you know where your students' strengths are, you can build in activities to help them access that learning and help them to achieve the objective. And our main goal is that we are always working toward the same objectives as the class. Ms. Bhavna, do you have any advice around lesson plans or how an LSA might use a lesson plan to inform their practice?
Yes, because I always suggest to collect the lesson plan before the week starts. So suppose for next week, I would like to collect my students' lesson plan by this Friday, so that, I have Saturday and Sunday to work. If I have to make some study material, if I feel that, some materials is there in the class, but how will I use them? I can think about the ideas, how I can use them. I can talk with the teacher. She also can share some ideas with you. If the lesson plan is that, I can work on it. But, if you get the lesson plan just on the day and you want to decide on the same day, it will not work well. So
yeah, I agree.
So
it's
a
really,
day before,
really
a week before a plan, then you can you will be at ease also that, yes, this is the work I have to do. You can do repetitions so that the child is, comfortable with the subject matter, and it is quite easy to work out.
Super, thank you. Hilkever, you have some ideas. Tell us.
Yes, it's very important for all LSA that you have the lesson plan before the week.
Oh, we've lost you. Hopefully you can come back and we can pick that up.
Very busy before, again.
We lost you just as you were saying it's very important to have
actually, because my internet used to disconnect me, that's why I moved in this side. Yeah. But this information that can help with all LSA, because I think lesson plan is always be helpful to us, because if you have this before the weekend, you're able to go through with the story and all of the things. And if you know also the label of your student, you can be very effective to modify the activity. And if the class teacher will be messed out the lesson plan, then the learning objective can really help you to modify it according to.
Yeah, oh, we're cut out again. But that's really true. If you have the lesson plan, just as Ms. Bhavna and Kilcliver were saying, you can plan stories around the lesson objectives. You can pre-teach vocabulary as well. That's really useful. So if you know that the body parts are coming up, you can chat to your student about, well, what is an arm, what is a nose, what are ears, all of those things, and pre-teach that vocabulary so they're ready to go. Thanks so much, Clifford. That was really valuable. And Ms. Bhavna. Okay, so how can we understand the child's needs and their barriers to learning? So how can we support them? It's important to understand their barriers. Now, speaking to your SENCO, speaking to the child's parents, and speaking to the child themselves, what stops you from learning? I would always ask the children from about grade 1 upwards, they're usually really quite good at telling you what stops them from learning. Even KG and below, you can get around it by asking them different questions like, is this easy? Is this hard? What works best? What do you like? Yes, Hilcliver, you've got your hand up. Tell us.
Well, the barriers is very important that you identify this from the beginning, because this can distract the whole class on how you're gonna work it out. So for me, it's the communication is very important, that you work out, that you understand your student, so you can be effective how if he's having a tantrums and how you're gonna deal with it. And with my student that I was working for previous academic year, I was really observing.
Oh, I think we've lost you again. Okay, so we'll carry on, but yeah, it's really important to understand those barriers and to ask for as much
I
information.
also have this problem when I have my interview with you, Miss Catherine.
That's okay.
I haven't sorted out yet.
No problem.
Thank you so much. That I would be.
That's okay, and thank you. Thanks for contributing. So asking the SEN teacher, asking the class teacher, asking parents, and asking the student, get to know them really well and get to know what they like doing. Bhavna, have you anything to add for how we can really get to know our students well?
I think meeting with the parents and staying some time with the child, it is very important, because the parents will give you a very different insight. The class teacher or the school will give you a very different insight, and then joining both the ideas, because what I feel at times, parents are they are in denial that the child has needs. They feel that he's just naughty, or he doesn't want to do it, or something like that. My child has no problem, no communication problem. He will learn. So what happens is, if you get a very good insight from school, what you will be planning to work with a child. So because the school send teachers and they are quite experienced and they know, I think in one glance, they can come to know what are the barriers, what the child might be having, major barriers. In day out, yes, when you will be working with the class teacher, you can see, but major barriers, they are the people who will tell you. So information from both the sides is helpful for an LSA. You can decide the rewards because the parent will tell you what he likes and he dislikes.
Yeah, that's so valuable, isn't it? They know their children the best. Rita, you've got your hand up. Tell us. You're mute.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, one of the ways that we can support the learners is also by observing them, close observation.
as a SEN teacher, I believe that most times when I observe these kids, I begin to find out different ways I can help them. Because sometimes when they are happy, like there's a particular child that I handled, whenever he's happy, he cries. When he's sad, he cries. So we actually tried using a particular strategy to be able to tell him and teach him that, see, if you're happy, you're supposed to smile. So sometimes you observe them and, you know, try to figure out how you can help them also by observation.
Brilliant. Brilliant. That's really interesting, isn't it? That he was crying when he's happy.
Very funny, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just a different type of communication. And
Yeah.
we've got to be open to all types of communication in this job, whether we're working with special needs. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Guys. So coming to the end, our SMART goals. So SMART, when you are talking about the kind of goals that we're setting for our students, they've got to be SMART. So what does that mean? Specific. So the child knows, and you know, and the teacher knows exactly what we want to achieve for that day, for that lesson, or just for that moment in time. What exactly do you want to achieve? They have to be measurable. So how do I know I've achieved it? If you're asking a child to, let's say, to improve eye contact, that's very broad. How do we measure that? If you ask a child that you will look at me 3 out of every 5 times I talk to you, that's measurable. So the child will know, okay, I didn't look at Miss last time, so I have to look at her this time because I need to get 3 out of 5 times. So they know exactly, it's measurable. They know how they can be successful. Then achievable, it's got to be something they can do. And this goes back to that little Mr. Nobody who is really kind of scared and maybe their self-esteem is down. So if you give them, as you guys were saying, lots of achievable tasks, then they start to build up their confidence and their self-esteem. It's got to be relevant or realistic. So something that they can understand is meaningful. So their goals shouldn't be something just random, like that they can name plants in the UK. That's not relevant. If you ask them something academic, like, can you name some of the birds in the desert that we can see at the weekend? That's relevant. So it's got to be something relevant. And then timely. How long do you have to achieve that goal? So are you going to achieve that goal today? Do you have 3 weeks, or do we have 6 to 8 weeks, the duration of an average IEP? And finally, guys, we are going to look at, just very briefly, confidentiality. So what is confidentiality? It means not passing on personal information about families, children, or colleagues or staff who you work with. And think of some, I want you to just think yourself of some examples where you may be expected to handle quite delicate or confidential information. So remember always that anything that you hear or learn in the school, if it's relating to a student, you've got to keep it confidential with your inclusion team, your class teacher, the parents, the student themselves. Keep it within that circle. You shouldn't be talking to colleagues about specific students. You can talk about the barriers and their needs, but don't name the students and try not to name the school. Just to be mindful of that, because confidentiality is really important. And finally, does anyone have any questions? We're going to go through, we've already done those ones. Professionalism we've done. Any questions, guys? You can put them in the chat if you wish. Don't post, oh yeah, for sure. Don't post your clients on social media. Thank you. That's really important. If you're sharing pictures, particularly if you're on our Incluzun LSA support groups, it's fine to post pictures, but put those smiley faces over the child's face or something like that. Actually, we really encourage you to post pictures of the activities you're doing but just cover their face and don't mention names. Please don't smudge the face. Yeah, thank you, Bhavna. And I think there are lots of different apps you can use, or if you're doing it on WhatsApp, you can just take the pen and scribble out their face on the picture and then post it. Okay, guys, I think that's it for today. If there are no questions, we can finish up. Please do, I'm going to post in the chat all of our different media platforms. Please do like and share on our YouTube channel, because that's really, the more people who we can reach, the better. All of our sessions are recorded and shared on YouTube. I'll edit the video tomorrow or the day after and get it up on YouTube. And thank you all so much for your input. If anyone wants to come and present on the forum, please let us know. We're always looking for people who are on the ground and who are experiencing LSA life in real life. Okay, thanks everyone for your time, and we will see you next month, first Tuesday of October. Have a lovely start to the year, and please do be active on our WhatsApp groups. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Ma salama.
Thank you, Miss. Bye.
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 Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Goodbye.